Okay, perfect. Right. So if you can go to the second slide, please. Great. So yeah, now we can start properly. So our aim today are to explore the question, can we learn languages through languages? And to do so, we'd like to share our specific research-based pedagogical proposal, which, as Ellen was saying, we call the integrated plurilingual approach. We'll be telling you about the theoretical framework, the what and the why, basically. And we'll also present some specific examples, that is the how. So we hope to cover the three questions today. And then, of course, in the discussion, we can go on. So this plurilingual shift implies a substantial pedagogical transformation to redirect the beliefs regarding language learning and so classroom practices. How? Well, mainly by expanding the code-based language skills included in the companion volume to the Common European Framework of Reference for Languages, from reception and production, which we know about, to two more modes of communication, interaction and mediation. All this in a plurilingual world, where seeing learners as plurilingual, pluricultural beings means allowing them to use all their linguistic resources when necessary, encouraging them to see similarities and regularities, as well as differences between languages and cultures. We would like to move from, another slide, please. It doesn't want to. Not even if you.
Sorry, it's completely frozen. I do apologize for this. I'm not.
Caterina, do you want to send me a quick email with the slides?
We're going to send it to you and see. I have no idea. We got a computer. Here we go. Now it seems to work. Off we go.
This is the next one. Yeah. Okay, right. So as we were saying, we'd like to move from the paradox of teaching plurilingual students in monolingual classrooms. Why? So that they become plurilingual, but they're already plurilingual, aren't they? So we would like to move towards this integrated approach that really connects, that's the key word, and works on the students' linguistic and cultural repertoire. That is, we aim to build on what Hammam calls critical translanguaging spaces, where classrooms become, and I quote Hammam, a social linguistic learning environment that interrogates micro and macro level power flows in the classroom and establishes strategic spaces for language use. But what do the actual citizens of the future think about all this? Now I'll show you a focus group that we carried out with third-year primary. We did have the subtitles in English for you to read what they were saying. As you can see, no problem. And on top of it, we've had some beautiful metaphors and images related to what speaking in different languages means for them. So, in fact, what's happening is what happens to translators, interpreters, language learners, linguists in general, what happens in real life. In E.M. Forster's words, connect, only connect. Live in fragments, no longer. This is a lovely quote, 100 years old, but it's very contemporary for us, isn't it? So switch codes between languages, that is, connect the languages that we know to make meaning of our context and break down our frontiers, connect people to open our minds to otherness and interculturality, and connect our skills to become agents and change makers in our own right. Finally, to become efficient mediators in a plurilingual environment, we need to explore and develop an approach that views the learner as an agent who can contribute actively to transform the group as well as his or her own competence and performance, not as an object that receives the teachers or researchers' transmitted knowledge. An approach that favors group learning as well as a positive consequence of respecting the socio-affective dimension while adapting aptitudes to attitudes, because we know that what does not usually form part of the equation are attitudes. Can we see that, Caterina, please? The attitudes? Okay, thanks. Whereas paradoxically, managing emotions is a key predictor of success in most research these days. This is not new, though, because I'm sure, as you know, Jane Arnold, Antonio Damasio, Rebecca Oxford, they already talked about the importance of attitudes and the social affective dimension. So what we've seen up to now is the source of motivation for the integrated plurilingual approach to language learning, which involves applying natural plurilingual practices in language learning contexts in an informed way. What do we mean by natural plurilingual practices? Well, they are the natural communicative actions carried out habitually by plurilingual speakers. So what we're saying basically is that if we are aware of and connect different languages and cultures outside the classroom, why not latch onto this authentic material to advance emotional and cognitive processing inside the classroom? The main aim of our 3 interrelated projects was to help teachers see language learning and teaching through a new lens, reshape their pre-understandings, reframe their current classroom practices, and hopefully engage in new ones. As you can see here, in monolingual instruction, the languages and cultures in the classroom are kept separate, whereas in an integrated plurilingual approach, the teachers' and students' linguistic repertoires are connected in an informed way. That is, we move from additional language only to additional language mainly. How can we make this pedagogical move? In our case, through the use of different manifestations of translanguaging. Although there are several approaches to the term, as usually happens with terminology, for our school-based research purposes, we worked with Kanagara's definition. He says that translanguaging is the ability of multilingual speakers to shuttle between languages, treating the diverse languages that form their repertoire as an integrated system. To this, we add Ofelia Garcia's nuance, very relevant in education, and I quote from Ofelia Garcia. Translanguaging, understood as the act performed by bilinguals of accessing different linguistic features or various modes of what are described as autonomous languages, in order to maximize communicative potential and to make sense of their multilingual worlds. Finally, a crucial move in our findings has been to step away from a strictly vocabulary and grammar-based syllabus to translinguistic conceptualization, integrating it explicitly and systematically in the mainstream syllabus. We describe it as the capacity to connect and express the same concept efficiently in different languages. That is, how do you express quantity in Catalan, in Welsh, in German, in English, Spanish, and so on. This has proved an efficient practice to relate concepts, to avoid teaching subjects in separate compartments, and to avoid repeating contents in each class. And very importantly, to detect positive synergies amongst language teachers and sometimes non-language teachers, as in CLIL contexts, for example. And which are these natural plurilingual practices that we have been talking about and that we work with? In our case, use of the L1, TOLC, which is translation for other learning contexts, that is learning contexts that are not for professional translators, integrated language teaching, literary identity texts, and pedagogically based code switching. After describing our theoretical approach, I'll now give you some details concerning some of the classroom-based research projects we have been working on. These photographs here, they're all from our own research, okay? Yes, thank you. We operate in, I think this is important because we operate in mixed groups that include university and school of language education research, language teaching, and professional development to encourage a more plurilingual mindset as well as a professional standpoint. This is achieved by promoting inquiry-based and research-related classroom development that is sensitive to the linguistic ecology of classrooms. One of the main aims of our project was to design and assess a formative intervention model that is agency-based. Following Landolf and Esteve, the additional language teacher education, should be based neither on theoretical instruction on what is to be taught and how, nor on one-off experiences provided by workshops and or a few hours of classroom instruction. Instead, it should first challenge the teacher's own beliefs about language and the way to teach it. To help teachers adapt the didactic model in a meaningful way, we recurrently found that 4 actions are needed. A collaborative reflection on their beliefs and perceptions related to language learning and to the state of the art in their centers, in their contexts. A didactic model that orients teachers to move towards plurilingual approaches in their school setting. To collect meaningful data from the teacher's appropriation process that help them become aware of their own transformative process, and to analyze the impact of the IPA model on the plurilingual competence of the students. To carry out this formative intervention, we gathered students' data, teachers' data, and data from schools' principals. This is a key predictor of success as well. We do need the school principals in these groups. If not, it doesn't work. The model followed what we call a 4-phase collaborative reflective cycle, which lasts the whole academic year. This cannot be done, as we said, in one afternoon with a workshop. This needs time, right? We can talk about it afterwards if you like. So it takes 6-8 months. There is a previous task in which both teachers and students fill in a pre-questionnaire and a linguistic background survey, and the students also complete the government competency test for their level. Then we move to phase 1 with a first focus group. This is done with the teachers, and here we question and analyze their settings and the actual situation regarding language education in their schools. So they discuss questions such as, where are we now? What do we do? How do we do it? Why do we do it? By discussing this, of course, the teachers first verbalize their preconceptions about plurilingualism and become aware of possible contradictions and different perspectives regarding their pre-understandings. In phase 2, inquiry seminars are carried out, which allow the teachers to contrast their own ideas and starting points with other proposals related to an integrated plurilingual approach. The teachers are presented with their pre-understandings in an organized way, using the transcriptions of the focus group in phase 1 and the results of the pre-questionnaires. Then we move to phase 3, where they are asked to design and implement plurilingual didactic sequences or projects so that they move from reflection to action by examining and testing the new model. And the researchers then record some of the sessions that are carried out in the schools. And finally, phase 4 includes a second focus group, which aims at reflecting on the process and consolidating the new model. The final assessment of the IPA project is carried out here, and we explore future lines of experimentations. And finally, teachers and students answer a post-questionnaire and participate in a post-focus group to reflect, as you can imagine, on the whole process, on the results, and then the students complete a competency test once more. And now it's over to Caterina for the how.
Thank you, Maria. Thank you very much. Okay, so bearing all of this in mind, what actually happens when we go down into the classroom, when we are working with the teachers, when we're working with the students? What actually happens when we start connecting? And our experience and our research says that many things happen. We're going to give you an example today of one of the outcomes of working from a more plurilingual perspective, but obviously there are many others. We are going to focus today on the plurilingual competence of the teacher, because as Maria was stating, when teachers follow this sequence and when teachers are asked about their own plurilingualism and their own plurilingual competence and their own relationship with their own languages, things start happening, okay? And plurilingualism and their own context and their own competence can start to emerge. We wanted to end this presentation today with the actual examples, therefore, of how our students at university, how students in childhood and primary schools work with their own languages, and how teachers themselves work with their own languages, okay? As Maria stated, where can this happen? Where is an optimal place for this to happen? Well, what we found out is that the additional language classroom can be an optimal context for promoting plurilingual competence as a starting point, okay? In a more situated perspective, as Eileen was pointing out at the beginning, we are in Catalonia, where there are 3 curricular languages at school: Catalan, Spanish, and English, okay? And English is still taught in a very isolated way, even though there are efforts to make more project-based spaces where languages intervene. But what we have found out very often is that in context, in many or most contexts, which are absolutely heterogeneous from a linguistic perspective, the English context is the less threatening context. So therefore, adopting Penny Cook's idea of English as an opportunity language and not as a depredator, lingua franca, etc., language, can actually prove to be rather useful in contexts where plurilingualism is wanted to be promoted. And in this context, where students precisely share the same foreignness, all the students, both students, Catalan students in this case, and those students who come from elsewhere can actually share the same foreignness towards learning. Okay, and as we know, language teachers are very often sensitive towards learning. Okay, and adopt strategies that other teachers may adopt less if we want to. Okay, so a plurilingual teacher, we can define, recognizes the benefits of children's languages, not only because they are beneficial to their own well-being, but because they are actually beneficial for learning. A language teacher must be aware, and this is very often common sense, but often it is not, that learning a language not only involves using the language, but therefore reflecting upon the actual language use. And this is where plurilingual competences emerges. Something which seems very obvious, but in our context, it is often not that obvious, is that a language teacher must be aware that there are many different, in this case, Englishes in the world. We have often gone to schools where the teachers do not understand the students because they are unaware that English spoken with a Urdu accent, that word is pronounced somewhat differently from how they have experienced their own language. And this obviously is part of what plurilingual competence is all about. And this is what we strive to work towards, and where we accompany teachers in a very, one would say, in a very methodological way, in the sense that we work with teachers in finding out how much, in what quantity, and in what way children's languages should and can be used for learning. Okay, so therefore the bottom line of everything that we have shared with you today is that language diversity as such is an asset, because it is, but not only that, it's just that it is beneficial for learning. Okay, and as Maria stated before, with translinguistic conceptualization, working in an integrated way implies working with other teachers. And this is how we understand that teaching and learning should be all about. Okay, would like to end this presentation by showing you some drawings done by some of our students and children when asked about their own languages, okay, and how they would represent, or how they could represent their own languages. We do this exercise with our own teacher training students when we work towards finding out and describing and looking into ways of how to teach languages. But before we do that, we ask ourselves about our own languages and our relationship with our own languages, because experience and research points to very clearly that the relationship we have with our own language greatly conditions how we then teach languages. Okay, these representations help us visualize what we think, what we perceive, and we think this is very, very important, especially with younger children, because it's something very, very tangible that one can see. Okay, these are examples developed with our students, fourth-year students, teacher training. And this is following the works by Larissa Aroni, which I'm sure you are familiar with, in relation to dominant language constellations. Aroni talks about this idea of dominant language constellation, which are those languages that are part of your own constellation. And one characteristic that we find personally interesting, and very pertinent to the way we envisage the teaching and learning of language, is the fact that a dominant language constellation, a DLC, can change over time because it depends on use. And this is what is interesting here. So teacher trainers were asked to portray, using in this case plasticine, their own dominant language constellation, and then describe it, focusing on not only the descriptive, but the connections, and if there were, and the kind of colors used to link to each of the languages. Okay. So therefore, these are exercises, tasks, initiatives that encourage and welcome language use awareness, okay, in the classroom. This is another example, and this is a student of ours who described her own plurilingual intercultural self. As you can see, and we're going to stop in a minute because it's already past 5 o'clock. Okay, as I said, the dominant language constellations described by Aroni, another group of the languages that language users most expedient languages. Therefore, those functioning in that entire unit, and specifically which focus on the needs that the speaker needs at a precise moment, okay, or over a precise period of time. To end, and now we are ending, I wanted to end this talk with a proposal we developed in a school, and it's based on, Maria mentioned it before, LITS, the literary identity text, where students, in a primary school in Barcelona, were asked to come up, obviously this is in the additional language classroom, were asked to come up with stories written in English, and translation was used as a translanguaging pedagogical tool, okay, for encouraging plurilingual competence. So therefore, students wrote the stories in English and then had to translate it into their own languages. This obviously implied family involvement, becoming aware that what does knowing a language actually mean. If I know how to read the Quran, does that mean that I speak? Does that mean that I know? If I can only speak but not write my own language, what does that mean? Okay, and this is all language awareness and promoting plurilingual competence. Other examples done at university level, also writing stories in English, but focusing on cultural references. So therefore using cultural references through translation to be able to explain traditions, Catalan traditions, etc. Okay, as other examples. Okay, also language visibility, so therefore languages that are posted up on the walls of the classroom to see similarities, to see differences, etc. So as we have been saying so far, if we want, final aim, as Maria said right at the beginning, is to be able to accompany teachers into slowly making things change, into revisiting, into rethinking the way their own relationship with their own languages and the way they teach languages at school. And our experience sustains the fact that very often this change starts in the language classroom with the language teacher, okay? But where we are working towards is generating spaces of language well-being, which as experience and as research sustains, has an effect, and a very positive effect, on children's self-esteem, identity, and ultimately academic performance. So many thanks for having us, and we are more than welcome to talk about, discuss, answer any questions, ideas you may have.